You have an experience of chronic illness, a really chronically stressed nervous system, and trauma and neurodivergence, all mingled together into one little special spicy trauma soup. I am Emma. I am a complex trauma specialist. I am a therapist that helps people work through their PTSD symptoms. As a neurodivergent girly who has dysautonomia and a chronic autoimmune disease, I also attract similar people with the similar issues. And as such, it's got me looking at the instances of where people have what I'd like to call the dark triad of having complex trauma, neurodivergence, and then some kind of chronic stress-induced illness. It seems to be this little dark hole area where the medical industry hasn't caught up to it. And what I've found to be true is that when you have these three things combined, they kind of display differently to if you have these things separately. So one day I saw a picture of when someone was explaining what a brain looks like to a neurotypical and what a brain looks like to a neurodivergent, what it feels like. And this picture, in essence, showed the neurotypical brain as a bento box with each food had its own little compartment and it was separate. So every little ingredient had its own place. And then the instance of the neurodivergent brain was a soup. And I couldn't relate any more. Thinking about, well, if I'm neurospicy and I have these other things that are related to my health, and I also have complex trauma, my soup would be a spicy trauma soup. And so this actually coined the term for me, and this analogy I couldn't shake, and it just kept making more and more sense. In fact, the more I thought about it, the more it actually made sense and the more it described my experience perfectly. So I needed to come onto here and create a series called Spicy Trauma Soup because there are more of you out there. I thought that it was so niche. If you think about a Venn diagram, you have the bucket with the trauma symptoms, the bucket with the neurodiverse symptoms, and then the bucket with the chronic illness symptoms, as if there's many people that sit into that little window where it's all three. But actually, you know what? There's so many comorbidities with being neurodivergent, and there is so much overlap when it comes to the symptoms of complex trauma that, in fact, there are so many more people out there that experience what I'm experiencing or have experienced. And then as such, because I talk about it, there's been so many clients that have come to see me because they just relate so hardcore with me because they're going through the same things and they see themselves experiencing life the same way that I have. And so I'm going to start this little series called Spicy Trauma Soup that talks about what it looks like sometimes when the ingredients of one bucket and the ingredients from another bucket come together to create a whole new ingredient. And this is the premise of talking about Spicy Trauma Soup. The spicy being the neurodivergent, the trauma being the trauma, and the soup resembling the mix match of experiences, identity, and belief, and everything that kind of comes together as a soup when you have an experience of chronic illness, a really chronically stressed nervous system, and trauma and neurodivergence, all mingled together into one little special spicy trauma soup. So stay tuned. If this sounds like you, or if you're like, you know what, this actually, yes, describes my situation perfectly, stay tuned because I'm going to be talking about those nuances. I'm going to be talking about what it looks like to heal through that. And I'm going to be talking to why, in fact, traditional methods or the ways that neurotypicals can get refuge or treatment through the traditional routes, why that doesn't seem to work for someone with this dark triad.